such a pleasure to introduce Joe. I'm really glad I get to do this. I think I was introduced to Joe maybe about 4 or 5 years ago during COVID. I remember playing him for the first time, and since I've been able to play him in LA. I don't think I've won a single match yet, but I'm sure there will be a time. In any case, I think Joe is not just a great backgammon player, but he's a wonderful person and someone I call a friend. So I think that's really wonderful. And then, something I was talking about with Antoinette and April before this call started is I love, obviously, we're all backgammon players. And I think Joe's accomplishments in terms of backgammon have been incredible. He's cashed a lot, he's done so much since he came back to the game of backgammon about 5 years ago. But it's also really fun to talk about other aspects of people's lives and their human side. And so I was doing a little internet research and came across the fact that Joe is has been coined the karaoke king. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about his karaoke stories, in addition to all the things he can teach us about backgammon. And with that, Joe, I'll turn it over to you. I'm thrilled to be here and be listening to your talk today.
Kara, thanks so much. I appreciate that. My karaoke exploits probably predate my backgammon time, and I was actually in a competitive karaoke league here in New York, and it's how I met my wife. So there's my karaoke story for you. But I appreciate that, and it's such an honor to be here with you and to share my last 5 6 years in the game and how I've studied and achieved some of this success that I have and hope to achieve more. So I really appreciate it, and I'm humbled to have been asked to be here. So thank you. I will start with where I really first began with the game. Is as a child, really. I played with my father and my sister and my mother as a kid. We had a backgammon board. My parents, came were introduced to the game around the '60s and '70s when it was at its height, right? And so they kept the game with them, and I was able to have the background of that game playing of as a child from when I was 8 years old to 15, 16 years old. I would play with my father. We wouldn't play with the doubling cube, but I think having that experience as a child has when I turned back to the game 5 6 7 years ago, having that experience probably helped me just have a grasp of how to move the checkers and didn't really need to learn the basics of the game. So I'd like to thank my father and mother for opening up the game to me as a kid. And then I would say about 6 7 years ago, I was actually at my job, and in New York, as Antoinette can attest, there's people that play backgammon out in the streets here in the city, and in some of what we call atriums in New York in the public private spaces. And there was a group where I worked that played at night down in the atrium. So I would walk by the backgammon board and all the people playing at night before I went home from work, and I knew the game. So I stopped and watched for 6 7 months. I just watched, and I would watch them play. They play. The stakes weren't that high, $5 a point, $3 a point. They played a chouette, but it was lively, and everyone was arguing about the moves. And I was watching, and I said, maybe I could play. And so that's kind of how I got back into the game. I didn't play for 15 years. When I left to go to college, when I left my parents to go off to college, I stopped playing for 15 years, and didn't didn't think about the game. And then, when I was at work and I went by these people who were playing, I started to watch and think maybe I can learn, relearn, and start playing. So I went online and found a website, actually, called playok.com is where I found a website, some random website to play. And I started playing and I said, okay, I want to get good. How do I do that? So what I've done to improve is I've read 15 or more backgammon books over the last 5 years. And not only do I read them 3 times over. I so basically I will go through each of the books, or many of the books that I've read, and give you some of the things that I've taken from them. Uh, but the important, I think, part of how to improve is if you read it one time, it's not going to work, right? You have to read it, and to really understand it, you have to read it twice, 3 times over to start remembering the positions and themes from the book. So that's yeah, I knew I wanted to get better, and in order to do so, I knew I had to start reading. So I started to I read these books, and I would say this was around 2017 is when I or 20 yeah 2017 probably is when I got my first book, and I started with McGrill. I mean, that is the classic book from the 70s, right? I started with McGrill. Although a lot of the themes from that book maybe are now out of date, I think some of the core elements remain true.
Once it
So
came
some
out.
of
But Helen didn't even know it until she was older and going for treatment or something. You know,
Yeah.
she was having and it came out. You
Hi,
know that this
Pam.
had
we missed.
happened.
Can
So
you
whether
do me a
she
favor and
suppressed
just
it or
mute
what the
your
heck happened, I
microphone?
don't know.
Oh, wow.
But at
Pam,
one point, it was after Bruce. I'm trying.
I got it.
All right. So thanks. So I started with McGrill, okay, and some of the themes that I remember from this book that I keep with me now as I play is I think about his safe first bold tactics, and the duplication tactics he discussed, which is pretty elementary, but it was something that I wouldn't have thought about until I read the book, and his slotting and splitting uh, themes on you don't slot your points, your 4 and 5 points, if you're already split in on the defensive mode in your opponent's home board, right? So it's ideas like that I literally still think about when I play the game now. Is I don't, if I'm thinking about a move, I look at my checkers and I say, oh, my back checkers are split. I really don't want to slot a point in my home board unless there's no other alternative, right? So I still think of that book and its themes now. Safe first bold. If I have an anchor in my home board and the position is calling for a little bit of a more aggressive play, and I'm behind in the race, I have more men back. I remember I have an anchor, I have more men back. I can play super, super aggressively on my home board side, right? So I recall those things because I read the book 3 times, and I remember certain themes that I take with me. So that was the first book that I looked at. Next is I went to 500 Problems by Roberti. So I read 500 Problems, and I think this book really gave me the basics on every aspect of gameplay, from opening to middle to end to containment to primes to closeout situations to um, how to uh, how to deal with a crunched board after a closeout. It was everything, and I think it's a book that gives you a real. If you read that book, you will be able to know at least something about every part of the game. And things that I took from that book include the reference positions of five at the end game when you have five checkers. If your opponent has five checkers off and you have and you have a closed board with one of your opponent's men on the roof, um, and you have five lefts off than your opponent, you can start to begin to think about whether to redouble your opponent. That's a reference position that was from that book. I've also remembered the importance of the race from that book with Roberti and how backgammon is really a race. And if you're winning the race, you're winning the game, and you should play safely to keep your racing lead. The next book I went into was Backgammon Boot Camp by Walter Trice, which is probably the the New Testament to the Old Testament of McGrill, right? Many people think that the boot camp book is it's known to be the next book that covers all the game like McGrill. And I remember from that position, and I still use this now, is the double three opening reference positions. I still remember this, and I think it comes up all the time because it's an opening position. If you start with a 3-3 and you make the 5 point and the 3 point, how that position is almost a double and take if your opponent's on the roof. It's a close to a double take with your opponent on the roof and a man on the ace point. And you can use that kind of position as a reference for all types of opening game cubes that I just think, okay, I know that this is close. It's a double take, but it's a really, really strong position. And uh, if the attacker improves by even a little bit, it's a drop from the other side. So I use that position all the time, and I use my racing decisions over the board on long races. I still use the Walter Trice method of if the race is 70 to 80, I still use the Walter Trice on when to take a double in that position. Um, I still use that method. So if I have any number between 70, if the leader has any number between 70 and 80, so a 7, you can take that and add 1, and it's 8 pips you can take within. And I still use that. And you can double minus, basically, I think it's -3 of that position. And the cube like a boss has helped me with that too. It's like half. So I still use that. If the leader has 75, I know the trailer can take by within 8 pips, and the leader can double at 5 pips, right? I just remember that from that book, and I still use it to this day from a book I read 6 years ago. Then I went into Classic Backgammon Revisited. This book, again, it went through the McGrill and older books, and I remember from this book to avoid the back game. So if you're playing and you have a chance to avoid playing a back game, you should avoid it at all costs. And as someone who now tapes all their matches, I know to try to avoid the back game because it's going to ruin my PR. So I try not to play them if I can. And I know it's not good anyway because you lose often and you lose gammons and they're hard to play. So I'm going to make a lot of mistakes and mess up because they are hard. They are difficult games to play. So if my opponent, I will often cube early knowing that my opponent's close to a back game, going, I want them to play this out because I know how hard it is to play a back game. So if my opponent has two points in my home board and I'm even close to a cube, I will send it no matter what, just because I want them to play it out. So avoiding back games is huge. I try not to get into them. They're really hard to deal with. After that, I went into the Michi books, which I think are absolutely amazing literature to go through. And again, I've read all of these 3 times over to remember the positions from them. Endgame techniques, I tell everyone all the time, that book, I know how to play bearing in against a back game and taking the checkers off against a back game without thinking about it now. I just you just know where to put the checkers because of that book. So if you're thinking about books to read, I think the Michi books, they give you lessons that are easy to understand and implement over the board. And I just know how to make the mountain structure, and then bearing off against an ace point. If you have an ace point game, you try to clear your 6 point. If you have a deuce point game, you take off 2 checkers if you can, and if you have a 3 point game, you again clear the 6 point if you can. And I just know, just from that book, I don't think about those plays anymore that much, and I could spend my time thinking about other things because you just know instinctively what to do from that book. Obviously, there's always exceptions to every rule, but instinctively you just realize how to play those games because of the Michi book. Opening game technique, what I took from that book was, at the beginning of the game, if you are starting to be behind in the race, you want to start priming. If you're ahead in the race, you either keep your racing lead or you're more in a blitzing game, right? And then I also took from that book the splitting your checkers versus coming down. So if your opponent is stripped on the 8 point with only 2 checkers on it, I know that's a time when I typically want to split my back checkers. Again, those are themes that come up all the time in every game, and I remember it from that book. And I don't have to think about it as much because that book told me what to do. And then next is I read his back checker strategy book. Learned a few items from that. Especially when to come off a 22-point anchor. So if you have a 22-point anchor, you want to, what positions do you come off of it? If you have made a prime on your side, a 5 prime on your side of the board, and you're on the 22-point anchor, that is a time when you want to start to leave the 22-point anchor if you can. Also, if you have no more spares to play on your midpoint and you can come off your 22-point anchor, you should seriously consider coming off your 22-point anchor. Those are items that I remember just from that book, and these positions come up constantly. The last thing I want to say from this book is I remember his F13 concept, where if you want to fight in your front board with 13 checkers, again, this is kind of the avoiding the back game strategy too. If you have an anchor and you have a last man back, and you can fly that man out into the outfield to help contain your opponent's back checkers, you should do that because you want as many checkers as you can in the battle. You want 13 or more checkers in the battle to do that. Keep your anchor and then keep your back checker moving forward. The next books I read were Roberti's books on opening play. And I think these are so important to read about opening play because it comes up every game. No matter what happens, you will open the game and you will have to play the first 5 rolls of the game. So you should study the first 5 rolls of the game because they're going to come up over and over and over again. The better you can get at the beginning of the game, you will win more games because you're not giving up equity early. His books on opening, it reinforced all of his first book goes over all of the replies to the opening rolls, which I think is a really good concept to think about, not just to memorize or know the opening replies, but those types of positions come up over and over again, and you can use the opening reply decisions as reference positions for future decisions. So if you know what to do on an opening play, for example, if your opponent brings 2 checkers down and you roll a similar number, you also want to bring 2 checkers down. If you're playing a game that's 10 moves in and you see a position where your opponent has 2, blots in the outfield, you can also create blots in the outfield, right? It's you can use the same themes from the opening replies to guide your decisions on later rolls, which is how I think about the game. So those books on the opening, I think were really helpful in honing that play. The next book I think that was important to my play were the two cube books, which were one was from Woolsey. He has cube reference position book. The one of the volume, I think only one of the volumes is in play right now, or is available. Um, and I remember from I remember positions from that book on how to recube positions when you're trying to create primes, and how you can be aggressive in those positions with building 4 and 5 primes. And I also remembered how to cube when you only have one man back against 2 men back. Just by having a little bit of structure with one man back against 2 men back, you can double. I learned to be more aggressive with the cube from those positions. And with the cube like a boss, the 5-5 reference position, you just immediately know what to do from that book. And it reinforced some of the racing cube decisions from prior books too. So I think I took up a lot of time with the books, but I think it was really important to kind of go through them and give everyone hopefully a flavor of what I've read and what I've taken from those books and how they've assisted my game. And if you find your game is lacking in any of those areas, I hope some of what I discussed can give you impetus to seek out those books and learn about that sort of play to help your game. Which again, my suggestion is to read them and read them over, and read them again and again and again, because those positions will come up and you will remember it better. So that's how I started to improve my game from the book side. I guess the next phase of this was learning how to play the tournament side of it, and trying to get better there. And I realized that I needed to study my positions more. Now that I've read the books and can kind of understand the theory behind why I'm making errors, I have to see where my errors are made. So here's what I've done to try to improve my game on this way. Every game, most games that I play, either whether they're live where I transcribe it or where I just am playing on Backgammon Galaxy, every, I won't say every, but many blunders that I make, I take pictures of those blunders, screenshots, and my wife thinks I'm crazy, but I have, because my phone is basically all backgammon board pictures. I created albums on my phone and have categorized all of my blunders to see if there's patterns in where I'm making mistakes. So I've started to see where I've made blunders, for example, where I have an anchor and my opponent has an anchor, okay? And I'm making a similar mistake over and over again. For example, I was making a lot of mistakes with an anchor versus my opponent having an anchor where I was leaving shots. And I started to realize an anchor versus anchor game is basically an even game. You do not want to leave shots in those games, right? You want to keep it even until you roll a double or your opponent leaves a shot, right? So that you can hit it and take the lead, okay? So I realized that I was leaving too many shots when I have an anchor versus my opponent having an anchor. And I realized, okay, I have to stop doing that. So I think that because I was taking the picture and started to see a pattern, I had over 30 to 40 pictures of blunders with anchors versus anchors. And I was like, what's going on here? Why am I continuing to make these mistakes? And you see them, when you see them in a pattern, you are able to hone in on what you're doing wrong. Same thing with, I've tried to do it with prime versus prime games. I do it with high anchor, just me having a high anchor or my opponent having a high anchor and trying to bear in. And I try to find themes in where I'm making a mistake and to correct them and to not do it again in the future. So I think that's a really important aspect of it. Uh, and then last thing I'll say is I'm also taking lessons from a grandmaster, Steve Sachs. So I realized that there are some positions that after I take the picture, I still don't know why I did it wrong, right? And so I will. I think the lessons that are most instructive when I meet with Steve are when we go over positions of a similar nature and try to figure out, okay, what do we need to do in these situations, and and make sure we don't make the same mistake. What are the themes of that position, of these types of positions, and what can we do to not make that mistake again, including taking the position that we have and then creating some sliding scales of, okay, if we change it just a little bit, when is it okay to do what you want to do? And I take notes on all our meetings, and have pictures of all the stuff that we go over. So that's, um, what I've done to improve, and I think that's what I think today's theme was, of how I've come in the last 5 years to, reach some of the success that I've had, which is not as much as many others, but I'm proud of what I've done, and I'm very thankful that you guys have asked me to be here. Um, and I hope that was informative. But I would love to talk the game or answer questions on what I've done, to try to improve and to have a conversation with you guys. So,
Wonderful.
yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Joe. I don't know if Antoinette's still here and you want to lead it, or if you'd like me to, but I had a couple questions and then I'll turn it over to other people. I was curious, Joe, how much time do you spend studying per day? How much do you play versus study? Like, what's kind of the ratio that you found works for you? And then my third question was, how much time do you think it took to see major jumps in your PR, and kind of what were those jumps?
So, okay, so I play. I would say earlier on, I was reading more than I was playing, right? I was studying. So the first 4 years, it was more reading than playing, and making sure that I had the base. Now I would say it's less reading and more playing and taking the positions I have and trying to figure out the themes of where I'm going wrong. How much time do I spend playing a day? I would say if I get up early enough before work, and I have time before I leave for work, I try to play for a half hour, just play a few games, before I head to the office. And then I don't really play when I'm at the office. Obviously, maybe during my lunch break, I might try to get a game in, on my phone while I'm sitting at lunch. Um, and then when I get home, you know, besides the time obviously I spend with my wife and my cats, I'll take, another, hour or so, maybe two, depending if she goes to bed early. I might stay up an extra hour or two and play just to try to improve. Um, uh, Depending on when we get to go to bed. So I would say, each day 2 hours, if if sometimes less, sometimes more. Um,
Hmm.
d- and then obviously I take all the positions that where I've made blunders at least, and categorize them where I can, where I see that there's definitely a theme in the position, and I can take a screenshot and categorize it, and then, when I'm on the train going to work, I'll open up my albums and I'll go through. Okay, I want to go through these positions, and I'll swipe through the same position and go, okay, I'm making this mistake. I'm making this mistake. Don't and I try to do it that way. So a couple hours a day.
Okay.
Joe, I have a
Cool.
question.
Hmm.
You mentioned that you read books 2 and 3 times
Hmm.
So my question is, are you reading per chapter 2 or 3 times, or are you going through the book completely and then going back to read it? So,
I think I read the whole book and then I started over and read it again. And I think my next thing is what I started to do, although I need to follow through a little bit better, is I have a little notebook with me now. So, especially like I think with Roberti's recent books, I have a notebook and I am taking my own handwritten notes of the book as I'm reading it and trying to create little lessons for myself so I can open up my book now and go, Roberti, you know, uh, 5 point versus 4 point, and what are the four themes that he discusses so that I can always just open up my little notebook and have some things to remind myself about. But it was read the book from the beginning to the end and then start over and read it again is what I did. Um, and I missed your last part of your question, Kara, about where did I see the PR jump? So I didn't really know what my PR was until maybe 2 years ago when I started playing. And by that time, I was pretty decent anyway. So I don't know from the beginning where I started PR wise because when the website I played on didn't keep track of it, so I didn't know what the PR was. I know there was one match I think against I played one of the first tournaments I played. I played like a 14 against against Steve because he had a file of the match from like 2017 when we played, and I played I think a 14 against him. So at least there was a yeah. I still might play a 14 in one game, but but so there was that, and there were probably many more instances of that earlier on than there are now.
Right.
So I've come at least I think that far. It was uh, I almost don't want to know how bad I was playing back then.
Ignorance is bliss,
But
right?
yeah, yeah, but and then I started. So I started early. When I played a tournament, my first tournament I played in was the Cherry Blossom. I think maybe it was 2017, and I was ignorant about the game. I knew I was good. I knew I was decent, but I was ignorant about what the levels were. I had no clue. Didn't even probably really know what PR was, right? And I remember signing up for the tournament, and Karen wrote me an email, and she said, "Are you sure you want to play in the championship division? There's going to be a lot of good players." And I was said, "Oh, I play online at this site, and my rating is really high, so I feel like I can do it." And I held my own. I won like my first two games. But again, I have no clue how well I played or not, or whether I really deserved to be in that level or not, based on what the PR would have been. But I just started playing it right in that level. But I didn't play in any Masters events. I played in like the limited jackpots. And then during COVID, when I started to see what my PR was, I I saw what others' PR was. I said, I guess I can play the Masters events, and so I just started joining them because I just thought it was the right thing to do because I could see what my level was on the PR, and I said, okay, I guess I'm playing at that level, so I might as well go play at that level and see how I can do. And so I'm glad I did that. But so to answer your question, I don't know where really started to jump or what caused it to happen. Um, you know, besides, I can just say what I've done to try to get better, and it's worked because I know that my PR has gotten to a level where I am sure I didn't start at that level.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. What else can we talk about? I'm happy to talk about any aspects of the game. I can try to discuss any my thoughts on what I'm thinking about on any positions, or to the extent that my thinking is even right. But I always the more you play, the more you know how many blunders you make, is what I think about it. So I'm always doubting myself on how many blunders I make.
I got a question.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Is there any way you can get us a list of the books that you have read, and thought were the most helpful in advancing your game?
Sure. So I'm happy to send you a list or to write it out after this of what I went over the books earlier, but and I think they all have something to give. So I think what I think is best is I can go through all the books that I've done and give you a flavor of what each of them have given me. And then you take that to what you need to improve your game.
Yeah, that'd be
right?
great.
Because each book really did give me something. It's really where you think that your game. So let me ask you, where do you think that your game needs the most improvement, or what would you want to improve the most?
Everything. But I have the same kind of philosophy. I've read a lot of books, and I've had to reread as well. But I'm always just looking for some other ones that people found of value, and for what reason. So yeah, if you'd like to share that, that'd be great.
So I think if you want to start with everything, I would do the 500 problems and the boot camp. Those are the two that I would do to give you a gist of the whole game. There you go.
That one.
That's the one. Have you read it?
No, I just got it at the Las Vegas tournament. It was recommended. So my next trip up, I'm going to dive into it.
I think it's a great book, and it's a little mathy, and I'm not a math person, so I kind of gloss over that a little bit. And I hope that's instructive to a lot of people too. Is I'm not a math person. I'm trying to get better at it, but I really am not that good with match equities, dice combinations, like what's my bear off potential or 3 rolls. That is not my strong suit, and it's something I know that I need to get better at, but math is not my thing. And I'm much more of a themes and reference position person that I try to use. So yeah, so I agree that the boot camp book is a great one if you want to get a whole flavor of the game.
Thank you.
When you read the 3-3 reference positions, hopefully you remember that, because it's like so enlightening when you read it and you understand it. You can really, really implement it into your game.
Thank you.
Okay. What else we can discuss? I love taking the videos of my matches. I think if you can do that, it really makes you think of all the times when you make a mistake that you don't have to make. Right? You see things that you just, if you to make sure you play slower and use the clock. I used to play faster, but now I'm playing at a pace that sometimes I'm down to a minute to go in the match, and I'm at the end I'm playing too quickly. But I was trying to use my time up until that point appropriately. So And that was just from taping the matches and realizing I was playing too quickly and missing things, just missing shots because I just played a checker too quickly, right? So sometimes I'll say to myself, okay, before I even roll, I say, I know I need 3s, 5s, and 9s to hit, you know? And if I don't say it, I might miss it. But if you say it and then you roll it, you'll realize it faster. So that was just something that I think has helped me as well, as calling out the numbers that I need beforehand, or at least taking a mental note of them, so that you do it before you roll. Because after you roll, you just start looking at the dice instead of looking at the checkers. So you know, you immediately start thinking of the dice roll, but and less of what checkers a block that's X amount of pips away. So if you can do that before you roll, I think your mind will be clearer, so that you can see what the best play is before you're biased by what you rolled.
Joe, would you share your Galaxy player name in case we ever want to sneak a peek at you?
Oh, sure. It's just my name. I don't mess around with that. Joe Urso, and then the number 1.
Okay.
I don't really change anything. I am who I am. So it's just Joe Urso 1. That's my Galaxy name.
Okay, thanks.
And there are people, I see people all the time. They say hello, and I'm happy to chat in the box. I'm very thankful for the game what the game has given me, and I just try to give back where I can. I love teaching and helping people get better. So
That's good. And I will never challenge you, so no worries there.
You it's okay. The best thing about backgammon is anyone can beat anyone, and that's, you know, part of the reason why I love the game so much is, you know, you can sit down and play you know, Mochi or Sander, and you can beat them. You know, could you do that in chess without, you know, a lifetime of study? You know, no, right? But you can do it in backgammon, right? You can sit down and play the best players in the world and feel like you have a decent chance of winning the game.
On occasion.
And it gives me, and it should, if you study, I think it's within the realm of possibility that you could improve to a point where you will feel that you have a chance to win those tournaments. And that's what gave me the drive to keep studying as much as I have. Is if I want to try to be one of the better players, I got to study, but it is attainable. That was the thing that really kept me going, is I think that it is achievable, and I don't think I'm like the smartest person around for sure, right? But so I think that I feel like if I could do that and get better at it, so many people can do that. I really do think that the game is open enough to so many people to get better and improve and be able to compete against the best players in the world. You may not, you know, I may not ever be as good as Mochi or Sander, but I feel like I can get to a level that's close enough to give me a good chance to win. And I hope that everyone here feels that they can do that, or that I have hopefully inspired someone to think that they can and get better.
Very encouraging.
It's true. I really believe that. Don't doubt yourself. You can do it. You can get better and improve. It's within your grasp.
I do have a question. As you're studying, do you sometimes feel that you're taking steps forward in the learning process and yet taking steps backward in implementing those things that you're learning?
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. I mean, I played a game today on Galaxy and my PR was like 12. You know, you'll make a mistake, a 400 blunder, and you just go, what the heck did I just do? You know what I mean? And I take it as a chance to, okay, learn and try not to do it again. And I will continue to make 400 or 500 blunders, right? I will never not stop doing that, but I hope to lessen the amount of times that I do that,
Mhm.
right? And so you can't be afraid of making the blunder. You can only, whatever blunder you make, you try not to do it again. And instead of, as I see now in the BMAB, instead of a blunder every 20 decisions, you make it a blunder every 23 decisions. So you still might make a 400 blunder, but instead of making it every 20, now you're only making it every 23, right? So I know that I'm going to blunder, and I know that I'm going to make a lot of mistakes, but the way I think of it is, if I can decrease the amount of times that I do that, it'll make me better. But I take your comment, your question. Yes, I feel that there are plenty of times where I take backward steps and you begin to doubt yourself, right? But I try to remember. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, where is your PR generally speaking? Where are you at?
My BMAB right now is 4.85, something like that. My last 130 is like 4.13. So if I have one more good tournament, really good tournament, I think I can get to the grandmaster status. So
Yes.
I have my last 130 as 4.13, I think, ish. So I know it's within my grasp. I think I just played the Cleveland tournament. It was the last one I played. I think I played like 3.8, which is really good for me. But maybe I can do it one more or two more times, and I can get to the level I want. But that's around where I am. So I think of myself between 4 and 5.
Are you saying that the BMAB event at the various tournaments is more important than anything else to figure out where you're at?
I think it's to figure out where you're at. I mean, I tape all my matches, so a BMAB event is the same as any other event for me. If you don't tape your matches, then the BMAB is a way for you to have others tape it and do it. Now, I don't transcribe my own matches. I have so my matches are taped and someone does the transcription for me, and I just get back the files that are transcribed. But so I don't think that the BMAB is the only way to do that. But if you're not transcribing or taping your own matches, then that's the way to do it. Or if you can, when you play online, if you play seriously online, you can start to see where your PR is just by playing on the Galaxy or on Backgammon Studio. You can see there on what your PR is. But it's a little bit different because one, it's not, there's different aspects of it. In some ways, you play better because you see the pip count, and right. So that's, in some ways it helps, and in other ways you're not as focused because it doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? It's so in some ways you do worse, and in some ways you do better. So the true way to figure it out is you play you play the matches and they're taped, and then you figure out where you stand. And then maybe you figure out where you need to improve.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
These are all wonderful, wonderful conversation points, and I appreciate it very, very much. Anything else that we can consider? I'm just happy I was able to go the full hour. I was nervous. I was nervous that we wouldn't have enough to talk about, but it seems that we have. So that was my deepest fear. I'd get on and I would only have 5 minutes to chat, and I'd be like, what are we
Okay.
gonna do with ourselves?
I have one final question.
Yeah, of course. No, of course.
What would you think is the area of the game that you find the most challenging personally?
I think the most challenging thing for me at this point, I think it's cliche to say prime versus prime, so I'm not going to say that. The most challenging part to me is big cubes.
Excuse me, big cubes is?
Big cubes. So if you're in a match to 11 or a match to 15 and the cube starts getting to 4, when to redouble to 8, or when to take to 8, or when to give it from 8 to 16, right, and play for the whole match. Those, I think, are the hardest decisions for me to make at this point.
That's probably because that's the very mathematical part, the equity stuff.
It is a mathematical. I think there's two aspects to it. One is the mathematical part, and the other part is they don't come up that often, so you don't study them as much, right? You have less positions to think about as a reference for what to do with an 8 cube, right? You have less. And I play the game, and how I think I improve at the game, or what I use to govern how I act over the board is, what are my reference positions, right? What is a position that's somewhat similar to this, where I absolutely know the answer, right? And then take, okay, who's better and who's worse, and what to do in that situation, right? That's how I think of the game. And it's hard to do with larger cubes. So, and that's where I feel like I make big blunders, because I just don't know. Kara, I did it with you, right? We played a game in Los Angeles, right? Yes, I think I did win, but I think I played at like a 9.5, because I won 11-0 because I was up 3-0, and I gave her a redouble to 4 or to 8 or something. And I gammoned or something, right? Where it was a large win, but it was a terrible mistake to redouble because I was up 3-0. At normal score, it would have been an easy redouble, but it's stuff like that you just, the large cubes, I think, are the hardest part for me to get.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you for answering.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Leslie, I think you brought us home with that last question. So, Joe, thank you so much. Antoinette, I don't know if you have anything else to add to this, but it's been a pleasure, and thank you so much, Joe.
Yes, I want to thank you. I want to thank you, Joe. This has been very informative.
Appreciate your time.
Antoinette. Thank you, Antoinette. Thank you, Kara, and thank you, April. Again, thank you for playing. And I really sincerely believe that if you have it in you and you want to get better and you want to improve, you can do it, and you can compete at the highest levels. Put in a little work. It's there.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you. Night.